All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Christopher Locke. I'm the IBPA Director of Membership and Member Services. And we're doing this webinar series called Get to Know Your IBPA Member Benefits because we want everyone to get an opportunity to see all the amazing benefits the IBPA has and get an in-depth look at them. Well, today I'm excited because we're doing constant contact. And then you're going to get some really helpful tips about email marketing. So I put in the chat already a detailed explanation of the benefits, so you can check that out. And to tell you more about this, we have Constant Contact Channel Marketing and Enablement Manager, Matthew Montoya. Hello, Matthew. How are you?
I'm great, Christopher. Hello, everybody.
I'm going to go away, and Matthew's going to take over. So thank you very much, Matthew.
Hey, thanks, Christopher. Hello, everybody, and good morning to some of you. Good afternoon to the rest. Those watching on the web, the recording, well, I don't know what time you're in, but I hope you're having a great day. My name is Matthew Montoya. You did not come to hear my biography, but just a little bit about me, just to establish some credibility. I've been with Constant Contact for 11 years. My sole job with that big, long title is to teach and support users of Constant Contact. So as you can see here in our agenda, we have a lot to share today. So I'm going to do this fairly quickly through the agenda just so you know what we're going to cover. We're going to talk a little bit about regular email. So things like Gmail, Hotmail, tools like that. I think I'm probably preaching to the choir a little bit. I doubt many of you would consider using that for bulk marketing. Bulk marketing meaning that you're sending out marketing to more than one person. But we'll talk a little bit about some of the constraints around that. We're going to talk about where people are reading email. Probably not a big shock on where people are most likely reading email in this day and age, but we'll cover that. We'll talk about personalization. In particular, we're going to talk about two concepts of personalization. We're going to be talking about certainly personalizing the email with somebody's name or other pertinent information, but we're going to especially talk about content. We're going to talk about making relevant content being critical in getting people to interact with emails. Then we're going to talk about how to build an email to cause action and why we want to call action. Now, hot off the presses, there has been a change in the world of Apple and some of their new privacy protections and how that might affect email marketing. So I'll deep dive into that and give you as many answers as I can around both what that is, what you should do to prepare for it, and what Constant Contact is going to do about it as well. We're going to talk about data and how to leverage that to make better marketing decisions. And then we'll talk about automation and we'll take questions, as Christopher said. Now, before I get into content, I want to share something about this content today. Most of this content is product agnostic. So I understand that some of you are not using Constant Contact. Those of you that are using Constant Contact, thank you. But I understand that not all of you are using Constant Contact or are going to use Constant Contact. We do have a great offer for you as a member benefit. But what I like to do is share information, and that information is useful. Most of this information is useful no matter what tool you're using to do email marketing, because regardless of whether you're going to use Constant Contact or not, we want to see you be successful. Now, there are a few features that I'll touch on a little bit that are Constant Contact specific, but not many. Most of this is product agnostic. So let's talk a little bit about regular email. So again, we're talking about Gmail, Hotmail, Outlook, tools like that. And first, let me just define bulk marketing. All right. So bulk marketing is obviously the bulk part is you're sending out to many people. The marketing part is the thing that I find some new users or people that are novice to the concept of email marketing, they need a little bit of definition around. So what we're talking about is making any kind of solicitation in an email. So sending out multiple emails to multiple people with a solicitation of some kind. So what you don't want to use to do that is a tool like Gmail, Hotmail, etc. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is limited formatting. You really can't add a lot of panache to an email style. Certainly, beautiful book covers and other kinds of related art. You really can't do that very easily. The formatting, you can't really do much around fonts. Sure, you can change the font size, but you can't really do a lot of style, add a lot of style to those kinds of email. It is more susceptible to filters, and the reason for that is that when you send through your own domain, through your own Gmail account, et cetera, it's your responsibility to make sure that you're keeping lists clean, that you're managing your lists, you're managing bounces and spam complaints and things of that nature, and it's your reputation on the line. When you send through a company like Constant Contact or Constant Contact, you're actually writing on our reputation, and our reputation is sterling in the industry. We've been in business for 25 years. We know how to keep you out of the spam folder. Also, branding, right? So you really can't add your logo or any stylistic brand color or anything like that, and that's going to hurt you. But then we get into some of the really big problems with sending bulk email with solicitation, and that's you really are more susceptible to spam complaints because you're sending what is typically a very personal experience, that kind of transactional email, but you're asking for business in some way. And most importantly, you're breaking the law. So there is in the US a law called the Can Spam Act. And what it says is that you have to give people, if you're going to solicit for business, the ability to unsubscribe. There is no ability to unsubscribe from Gmail or the like. And similar laws, even tougher laws, are found in other parts of the world. And so we need to make sure that if we're going to solicit for business in a bulk way, we're using a tool that allows for that, and Constant Contact is one of the best. So with Constant Contact, in case you're unfamiliar with us, well, the proof is in the pudding, right? There's all that branding. There's all that beautiful imagery. But to cut through all of these bullet points, the really big point of using a tool like Constant Contact is not so much the branding, which obviously is great, not so much the content, which looks fantastic, it's the trackability. Because ultimately, a tool like Constant Contact gives you the ability to have some insight into your subscribers. What did they like? What did they not like? What content is most valuable? Who is paying the most attention? That ultimately helps you make better decisions. And when it comes to email marketing, and I promise you this is one of the few selly slides that I have, but I have to share it because the ROI in email marketing is fantastic. Over 3 times the conversion rate of social media. Now, I do not want to throw social media under the bus. Social media is a fantastic tool, but the reality is not everybody is tuned into social media. Just because you have followers doesn't mean they're actually seeing your content. Now, that is true in email marketing to a certain extent, but at least in email marketing, you have some idea of who isn't seeing it. And for every dollar spent, you're going to see about $45 in return for every single dollar you spend. That's really fantastic. But let's get into some of the real education now. So let's first think about where people are reading emails. And again, probably not a big shock. I'd be willing to bet that some of you are looking at your phone right now, looking at email. Who else is doing that? People you're trying to reach. So 91% of email check their email daily. I think that's kind of silly because I can't imagine people not checking their email daily. And certainly 88% of them are checking it on a smartphone. So if we think about it, if this was an in-person event, which I can't wait to get to again, if I was in an in-person event and I could literally ask you a question and hear your voices, I'd say, what's the most used app on your phone? And many of you might shout back Instagram or Snapchat or Facebook or a slew of other apps. But I'd be willing to bet if you really thought about the usage, your usage on your smart device, probably email's number one. And that's true of the people you're trying to reach as well. Now, we don't think of email as an app because it's such an important, ubiquitous utility, right? But we're in it all the time. It's an effective place to reach people because people are paying attention to it almost constantly. But when it comes to email marketing, you can build all the beautiful emails you want. You can have the trackability and you can have that fantastic branding, but will they open it in the first place? The whole point of an email is to get it open, right? If you put in all this beautiful content and they don't open it, then what's the use? So let's start with some tips around opens, and then I can already hear some of your wheel spinning. We'll get to those questions in just a second. But first, what surprises a lot of folks is that when it comes to getting the email open, if I were to ask you what drives opens, literally what makes people decide to open an email, most people would reply the subject line, of course, Matt. It's not necessarily true. So if you look on the slide, there's a couple of different pieces in the inbox. Again, this is what's seen in the inbox. And as I said, most people will assume that the subject line drives opens, but our research proves that that's not actually true. The most important thing you need to consider when building email marketing is who's sending the email, the sender's name. Now, the reason behind that, I'm going to put this ownership on you a little bit. Think about your inbox. Right? You're stopped at a stoplight, you're at the grocery store, you're at your home, you're zipping up and down the inbox. You're very unlikely going subject line to subject line to subject line. The first thing you're likely looking at is who sent this to me, who sent this to me, who sent this to me. Now, if you have a relationship with the sender, if you know them, if you trust them, certainly family members, coworkers, etc., then you're going to slow down and pay attention to that email. But when it comes to organizations, that sender's name is critical. right? And this is one failure point that happens in a lot of folks that don't seek out training like this. They will often use their name as the sender's name. Now, for some of you, that might be appropriate, but generally the best practice is to share your organizational name because that has the brand equity that people would understand. That's likely the name that they signed up as a subscriber. That's probably where the name that they grabbed a business card. That's the name they saw at a trade show, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be familiar. And that familiarity is really important because that's going to slow people down. Now, you might assume that the subject line now would come into play, but actually there's another piece that a lot of folks are unaware of, and it's called pre-header text. It's a little bit of text that appears underneath the subject line or beside it, depending on the inbox. The pre-header text, if you didn't seek out training like this, most people would be showing the first sentence of their email. What this tool does is it just picks up the first bit of text it sees and it displays it. Now, for some of you, that first bit of text might be compelling, it might be useful, it might be powerful in a way to get people to open an email. But for some of you, that might be some very transactional information like having trouble reading this email, click here. Or maybe the very first sentence is just an introduction. That may not be compelling enough to get people to open the email. What's happened is we've been taught to read that little bit of text for context. Right? That context helps us understand what is this email actually about. Now, Constant Contact gives you the ability to actually edit that little bit of text to be more marketable. You can actually use that as almost a teaser, give people just a little bit more information about the email, but also leave it almost as a cliffhanger, open-ended. So we can see here, excited to share this fantastic news. Well, the only way people can find the conclusion of that is by opening the email. So it's a very clever way to get people to open the email as long as you're not baiting and switching them. As long as the content inside is related to what you're using in the pre-header text, then it's very, very effective. So in third place comes the subject line. And with the subject line, I'm going to share a couple of ideas on how you can leverage the subject line to get you more opens and ultimately more clicks. So a couple of tips. When it comes to subject line, and I'd be willing to bet you're probably the best audience I've probably ever talked to about subject line creation. I'd be willing to bet you suffer less than the average end user that I talk to about subject lines because you're creatives. But here's a couple of ideas in case you struggle sometimes with a subject line. Try to use the words you or your in your subject lines. Those are really powerful words because now you put the question, the ownership, the title you're talking about, whatever it is you're promoting or talking about in your email, it's now on them. They're now thinking about the impacts to them, the application to them. And I find you and your are actually really easy to slip into a common subject line. It doesn't require a whole lot of creative energy to employ those words, but they're very powerful. Another fantastic subject line model is numbers. So giving people numbers in the subject line actually do a couple of things. You know, this is going to be a fun fact I'm going to share in just a little bit. But nobody really likes to spend a lot of time in an email. And so the power of numbers is it's finite. If I give people 3 tips, 5 titles, 7 ideas, if I give people numbers like that, it's basically informing them that I know you're busy, I respect your time, here's a little bit of information you'll find useful. And that's really helpful. The other benefit to numbers is that they're eye-catching, right? And so people will notice the number and open our email. Now, in email marketing, the 3 most successful numbers are the ones I just shared, 3, 5, and 7. 3 gets the highest open rate. Just obviously make sure your content is segmented so that you are actually offering the 3 things or the 5 tips or whatever you're doing. Brackets. Now, brackets may not be completely applicable in this audience, but I'll go ahead and talk about why they're powerful. So brackets basically inform people about what kind of content they're going to see, especially things like videos or white papers or thought leadership. Brackets visually are really powerful, right? And visual actually plays in this. In fact, that's gonna fit into my next one too. If we think about the inbox is a very busy place, right? It's a lot of data that people are accessing very quickly. And so the fact that there's a bracket will slow people down. It's a visual cue for them to slow down and pay attention to your subject line. Similarly, alliteration is really powerful. Repeating the same letter for every word of your subject line is a visual trick. Because it's a pattern in a world of non-patterns, it's going to slow people down. Now, not listed in here because I didn't know if it would play in this audience, but I'm going to go ahead and go with it. Emojis are also similarly very powerful because they're visual, and Constant Contact does support emojis. Now, in your industry, I'm going to just say buyer beware. You know the kind of respect you're trying to gather in your industry. It depends on your audience, but emojis are really powerful. An illusion. Illusion is one of my very favorites. I use it quite a bit. An illusion is alluding to something pop culture. So a famous movie title, a famous book title, a famous song lyric, something like that that your audience would remember or recognize is really powerful because it's familiar. Again, in the world of a busy inbox, anything that slows people down is a win. Obviously, whatever illusionary tactic you use needs to be as familiar to your audience as you think it might be. You don't want to use an illusion they wouldn't get. So let's talk about some things not to do. And I doubt this would be very common in your industry, but we'll talk about it. Don't imply a continuing conversation. I bet you've seen emails like this, and they're very frustrating. So using the forward or response or reply, like you see there on the right-hand side, just frustrates people and is going to increase the number of people that are going to unsubscribe and mark you as spam. It's a dirty trick, and it's not really a very smart thing to do. Similarly, implying false urgency. So giving people the idea of they're going to miss out on something, but find out that when they open the email, it's not actually true. Well, that's bait and switch, and you can annoy people. Also, don't be deceptive, right? So don't use things like your confirmation. These are all things I'd be willing to bet you've seen, especially from spammers. Don't act like a spammer. You're going to end up in the same kind of trouble that they're in. Similarly, try to use tactics that spammers don't, or try not to use tactics spammers use. So don't use spammy words in your subject line. Free, guarantee, mortgage, words like that you'd see in a spam, maybe avoid in your subject line. Perfectly appropriate to have those words in your body of your email, but in the subject line, if a spammer does it, and a spammer regularly does it, you don't want to do it. Writing in all caps. You don't want to write in all caps. It's, I think, probably in your industry considered pretty unprofessional, but certainly it's something spammers do, and we don't want to do that. And don't use excessive punctuation. And this is one that actually got me. So I was chatting with Christopher before the webinar, and preceding my 11 years of Constant Contact, I actually worked in an association. And I used to think that I was being very creative by using ellipses to keep my subject line short. I was actually ending up sometimes in a spam folder, because one thing spam filters look for is multiple punctuation in a row. So triple question marks, ellipses with 3 periods, right? When it sees that, it's assuming you're trying to replace words with symbols, and some spam filters will mark you as spam. Now, things to remember when you're writing your subject line. Keep it short. About 5 to 7 words is all you have. So make sure you're leading with the primary thought, because after 7 words, it's probably going to get truncated. Use that pre-header text to help you with longer content if you want. But let's talk about what might be on the top of your mind. Getting them to open the email isn't enough. Open rate reporting is getting more challenging. And as some of you may have heard in the news, it's primarily being driven by Apple. So Apple is launching something called, or has launched actually as of the 20th, something called Apple Privacy Protection. So what it is it's an update for iOS 15, iPad iOS 15, Mac Monterey, and watchOS 8. And what it'll do is it'll preload images, including tracking pixels. So I have to take you into my industry a little bit, but it's worth it. So in our industry, and this includes Constant Contact and any of our competitors, the only way that we can track opens is behavioral. And that behavior is actually tracked by hiding a 1 pixel by 1 pixel image in every single email somebody sends. This is how our competitors do it too. This is standard in the industry. Now, in case you don't know what a pixel is, a 1 pixel by 1 pixel is almost invisible. And this is a little image. And when the image is displayed, we know that the email was opened because the image was displayed, and we count that as an open. Well, what Apple is doing is they're pre-fetching images. So the moment that an email lands in the inbox, it's actually loading the images behind the scene. It's putting it in a cache so that it's ready to be seen immediately. The problem is that if they're preloading the images without somebody actually opening it, that counts as an open, whether they opened it or not. Does this just affect iCloud and Apple Mail users? No. Anybody that's using the email mail app is going to be affected. So I'd be willing to bet some of you on the call today, and certainly you probably know some people that utilize their iPhone to check more than just iCloud emails. They're also checking, they synchronize Outlook or Gmail, and those count as false opens. So basically, the impact here is pretty terrific. So what'll be affected? Well, what you're going to see actually, if you're currently using email marketing, and this again is true for Constant Contact and any of our competitors, is higher opens. You're going to see a lot of new higher opens that are maybe real, but most likely false positive. You will see lower click-through rates if you use Constant Contact, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. That is because, well, I'll go ahead and just tell, I don't know why I'm delaying it. Constant Contact currently shows a percentage of clicks versus opens. Well, if your open rate increases and your click rate stays static, then that number is going to immediately look lower. So what we're going to be doing soon is we're going to be changing the way we report, and some of our competitors already do this, and some of our competitors are going to do this because of Apple. Things like automation, things like resend to non-openers, contact insights based on segmentation. This may be a little too advanced for this audience. I don't know how many of you are using Constant Contact, are utilizing some advanced features in our competitors. But if basically it's something that's based on automation that's triggered by opens, well, you could be sending automated emails to people that never actually open the email. When does it take effect? It took effect yesterday. Now, the world's not going to change here in a second. So this is opt-in. All right, so people have to opt in to first upgrade the software. They have to opt into the privacy protections. So you're not going to see an immediate change if you're currently doing email marketing, but what you can anticipate is you're going to start to notice these kinds of changes, especially around your open rate. Now, for those of you that are currently using Constant Contact, we're going to be adding more engagement tools into the email. So I'm going to get to it in a second, but ultimately the true metric has always been for success, clicks, behavioral, right? So we're going to be adding more tools to affect that kind of behavior. So for an example, we're going to be looking into giving content thumbs up, thumbs down, which will force people, because let me actually back up and just explain a click just a little bit. So a click is basically somebody clicking on a link and going somewhere else, right? Well, some people have content that for whatever reason, they can't make available on the internet, or they don't want to make available on the internet. So the idea behind the thumbs up, thumbs down type of behavior is that at least you're getting a click, even if you're not directing them to somewhere else. And we're also looking at doing some things around the way content is shared to make it easier for people that can't or don't want to share content on the internet to drive that click, the ability to share complicated content that's actually clickable. As I said, our click metrics in Constant Contact are going to be changing. So we're going to be going from a click open to click percentage to a send to click percentage. And so those of you that currently use Constant Contact, just be ready for your click rate to go, your open rate to go up, your click rate to go down, but that is actually pretty true across the industry. Now, if you're currently using any email product, you should focus on what you should have always focused on. And I don't mean that to be preachy. It's always been about the click-through rate. And here's a little bit of inside baseball for you, all right? Open rate has always been a notoriously finicky number to actually cement the idea of success around. That's because if we think about it, many people use Gmail, many people use Outlook and similar tools. Those tools offer a preview pane, so you could see the email before you actually engaged in it, right? Or just preview. That counts as an open, right? Based on the parameters that I shared with you earlier, that counts as an open. Now, somebody may have just zipped in and out up and down their inbox, and that preview flashed for a second. They didn't engage with the content at all. But if we actually take a step back and think about it, somebody could have opened the email and immediately closed it. Somebody could have opened the email, thought it was garbage, hated it, have a bad opinion, and left the email. And yet, if you solely rely on the open rate, you could be patting yourself on the back over that open. Open rate doesn't actually prove very much. It is okay for looking at trends. If you're seeing your open rate, you're trying some experiments with your subject line, things like that, it's okay to use as trending, but it's not the ultimate metric to pay attention to, nor has it ever been. Click rate proves the email was delivered, proves it was opened, proves that the person actually engaged with the content and can tell you specifically what they engaged in. So making sure if you're employing email marketing now, or you're considering it, focusing on those clicks are critical, because open rates were never reliable. Now, I just went through a few of these bullets, but I want to talk about the last two, all right? So the biggest value in email marketing, and especially focusing on clicks, is the ability to understand what content is engaging your audience the most, because that helps you with future segmentation. Now, depending on the kind of marketing you're doing, it might behoove you to break people up into smaller groups based on interest. And the one way that they can tell you what they're interested in reading or accessing the most from you is through segmentation, carving up your list into smaller groups and giving them curated and relevant content. If it's relevant to them, they're more likely to engage with it, right? And we want to continue that relationship to cause behavioral change. That's how we're going to convert people and get their attention. So clicks is valuable because of all the factors I shared before, but it's most valuable in giving you an idea about your subscriber base. So how do we get more clicks? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example of an email. Now, I wish this was a live presentation where I could hear you shouting out, but we'll just have to pretend we're there. To show you an email, and I want you to imagine what's wrong with this email, okay? And this should be the right audience to pick out the right answers. Firstly, I gave you 5 seconds to review that email. That was obviously too short amount of time, but why 5 seconds? Well, we talked earlier about the penetration of people reading email on a mobile device. So here's the brass tacks. The average email subscriber spends on a mobile device 5 to 15 seconds in an email. Now, you get a little bit more time on a PC or Mac, but not much. And so what you should have seen wrong in that email right away is too much content. It was overwhelming. People didn't know what they were supposed to do. We're not engaging people. We're not getting an idea of what they're interested in. All of the links and all the calls to action, there were so many, you probably didn't even know what to focus on in 5 seconds. The reality is most people just close that email and unlikely open it again, but some people may take more dire actions. So when an email doesn't take mobile design into consideration, about 80% will just delete it outright. And that's the majority, obviously, but 30% will just unsubscribe because the email was inherently irrelevant, right? This email, no matter the intentions of this organization, is irrelevant because it's inaccessible. There's way too much content. And as I said, all the calls to action are buried. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to focus on here. And it becomes more problematic on a mobile device because it can either render full page like this, or more likely it's going to be so small that people can't access it. Now, of course, Constant Contact is mobile responsive, meaning it'll redesign itself based on the device. But if we look at this email that has multiple columns, the way that mobile responsiveness works is that anything that is in a multiple column stacks on top of each other. So things that are on the left get appended at the bottom with things that are on the right. So this long, unwieldy email just suddenly got much longer and more inaccessible. So if that gives you the idea of where we're going, let's get some clicks and talk about email marketing best practices. Now, some of you might say, hey, Matt, most of my audience is on a PC or a Mac. Well, the reality is mobile device and mobile readership has changed people's behavior so much that the attention span in a typical reader is really low. Now, there's really good news. It's the click, right? If you have something more complex to share, if you have something more complex to say, share it on the internet. Drive people to click, because not only is it trackable, not only are you finding out what people are engaging with, but people are more likely to actually weigh pros and cons and make decisions on the internet. They'll slow down. Why? Because it's the first yes they're saying to you. When they determine that they are interested and they want to learn more about something, they're mentally actually committing to you in a small way. That commitment starts a journey where that's eventually how you get a phone call, a follow-up email, or a sale, right? So, high level, if it's not already obvious, keep your email short, succinct. Less is more when it comes to email marketing. So for text, you want to keep your headlines to about 22 point for the headlines and 14 point for the body. That's going to keep the content fairly tight. But when it comes to your calls to action, your CTA, those are things for people to click on. Less is more. No more than about 3 calls to action. Now, you can repeat those calls to action in different parts of your email. And I'm going to talk about a really clever way to do that in just a moment. When it comes to text content, you want to keep yourself down to about 20 lines of text overall. And you want to include images, and we're going to talk a little bit more about images in just a second, to help convey a complex message or get a point across. And when it comes to calls to action, fewer links equal higher clicks. Again, if you give people too many options, they're going to ultimately choose none. Now, it is perfectly appropriate to have an email with just 1 call to action. That's going to get you the highest behavioral rate because you're only giving people one thing to focus on. Now, I talked to you just a moment ago about another way to have a call to action, and that's with images. Images are powerful ways to encourage people to click because many people inherently and naturally try to click on an image to go do something. And it's actually a hidden CTA. So you can actually see a couple of calls to action here I have in my email. But the reality is that this image here is clickable to that same call to action. This image here is clickable to that same call to action. You want to make your images clickable because many people will try to click on them, and it's a very subversive way to encourage clicks. When it comes to other things people should look at imagery-wise, obviously include your logo and make it clickable. Also want to keep your image count down to about 3, not including your logo. Now, never make an email that's 100% image. Now, I can imagine that some people may sometimes build in a flyer or something like that, right? Something in InDesign or the like publisher, and they make their entire email the image. The problem with that is that images in this day still do get blocked. Be willing to bet you've had to download an image to see it. Well, if our entire email's an image and it's blocked, we're basically sending people nothing. But even if your email is mostly image, it could end up in the spam folder because spam filters are looking for an email that contains more than 80% image versus text. So you do need to have text in the email. But including images are a great way to encourage higher engagement rates. I highly doubt this is a problem in your industry, but just to be clear, be consistent with your brand colors. Every email you send should be in your brand colors. Some people will celebrate specific events or specific calls to actions or holidays with different color schemes. You want to avoid that because brand recognition is connected to color. In fact, our brains recognize the color of a brand before we recognize the logo. And as I said, images like a logo can be blocked. So sometimes your brand colors may be the only thing that comes through the email. Just make sure that you stick to it. And if you need to celebrate something special or call attention to something special, share it with your content, not with the branding of the email. Now, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but let's talk a little bit about personalization. So there's literal personalization, like you see here. I have Christopher's name in the email. Constant Contact does give you the ability to personalize your content with any data you want. That can be somebody's name or industry. It can be their place of work. It can be anything that you've collected. But there's an additional way to make your email personal, and that's you can personalize the subject line. And that's one tip I held off when I talked about subject lines because it's such a powerful tool of personalization. Constant Contact does give you the ability to personalize your subject line with any data you want as well. Now, unlike a mail merge, which I imagine many of you are thinking this is like, it's like an enhanced mail merge because we understand that sometimes you may be missing data. Sometimes you have somebody's name and sometimes you weren't able to get it. Well, we have a fallback. So if you have somebody's name associated with an email address or any other data, we'll display it. But if you're missing that data set, you can have a fallback, meaning that you can have a different word replace the missing word. Personalization, if it's not obvious, is really powerful because we're all selfish creatures, and when we see our names and other pertinent data in things, we pay attention to it, and especially the subject line. But I also want to talk a little bit about personalization when it comes to the content itself, not just text content, but the relevancy of the content, because the power of the click goes well beyond leading them to your website. So the idea here is keeping our content relevant. That personalization is really about having content that's as relatable to your subscriber as possible. And the reason you want to think this through is because the engagement rate is higher. Personalized emails receive an 11% higher open rate than non-personalized emails. That's specifically talking about subject lines. Personalized emails receive a 27% higher click-through rate, and that's ultimately what we're really after. And people that get personalization, again, I'm not specifically and only talking about personalizing like a mail merge, but literally taking into account who we're sending it to and making sure the content is as relevant to them as possible. And this is all around targeting your audience. And Constant Contact in particular makes it really easy for you to segment your audience out. We have a fantastic feature called click segmentation. And what click segmentation does is that when somebody receives an email and they click on a link, behind the scenes, when you're building the email, you have the ability to enable click segmentation. By enabling click segmentation, anybody that clicks on that link can be added to a new or existing list. Now, you don't have to use that list, but at least you've segmented these people out so that if you want to do follow-up marketing to them about similar content, you've already identified them as more likely being interested in this content. Now, if you want to get really advanced, segmenting people out, breaking them up into these smaller buckets, help you make future marketing decisions because you can create more relevant emails for them. So when they click on that link, they're automatically added to your list for you. Now, for the advanced folks, you want to take this up a level. You can automate your marketing. Now, Constant Contact, I can't speak of our competitors, but Constant Contact offers automation in 3 distinct flavors. First is date-triggered automation, meaning you can send an email on somebody's birthday or anniversary of doing business with you, send them a thank you or other kind of message, and that's date-triggered. So as long as you've collected that data, you can automatically send an email based on a date. There's also behavioral automation. Behavioral automation, you can automatically send people an email or a series of email based on behavior. Now, we just learned that we probably don't want to create behavioral email automation based on opens because it could be a false positive. But clicks, you could automate email around the click. But we also have list-based automation, and that's, I think, the most relevant to this audience, because list-based automation, when somebody is added to a list, much like I just showed you Constant Contact is able to do with our click segmentation tool, you could automatically send them an email or any number of emails, up to 38 emails with Constant Contact, based on that affinity, based on that interest. Additionally, Constant Contact gives you the ability to automate if somebody joins the list on their own. So we have a variety of tools that help you grow your list on your website, through social media, and beyond. And you can tie that into list automation as well, so that when they sign up for a list, they can receive a welcome email to your list. And it's a great way to engage people. Now, another educational tip for you, and this is true whether you use Constant Contact or not. List-based automation has one particular email that really needs your attention. It's called a welcome email. And I'd be willing to bet all our competitors offer it, and certainly Constant Contact does too. Welcome email is delivered when somebody joins a list on their own accord. The welcome email has one of the highest open rates of any email ever sent, on average about 80%. It's not a really big surprise, because if somebody joins your list, well, they're showing interest in you, an immediate interest in you, right? If they're taking it on their own to join a list, they're expecting an email because they just joined an email marketing list, right? So if you deliver an email almost instantaneous to when they joined a list, they're likely to open it because they just requested it. This is a fantastic way to engage your new subscriber by setting an idea of the kind of content they'll receive, or even incentivizing them with some sort of discount or offer. It's a fantastic way to engage somebody who's very likely to be engaged. So you can set the idea of what kind of content they'll receive in the future, but it's a great way to engage somebody that's definitely more likely to open the email than not. So before we get into the Q&A, I want to talk a little bit about the relationship we have with IBPA. So we offer a variety of marketing tools, all under one price point. And what we've done with IBPA is, if you are a member, and if you're not, well, let me just say, if you're not a member, you should be a member. But if you are a member, Constant Contact has worked out a fantastic offer for you. You can get 10% off just Constant Contact, period. Just 10%, just as thank you for being a member of IBPA. But if you prepay, you can get that up to 20% if you prepay for 6 months and 25% if you prepay on a 12-month subscription. So the average price of Constant Contact is about $25. So you can do the math and see you're getting an immediate savings. But I want to talk a little bit about our full feature suite because I think it might be relevant to you, and then we'll get to the questions from Christopher. I just spent quite a bit of time talking about email marketing, but we have a lot more tips and advice and tools within email marketing that obviously this is not the perfect stage for, but we have fantastic tools within email marketing that really make your email deliver. But I want to talk a little bit more about list growth tools. I touched on that a moment ago, but we do have a variety of web-based list growth tools, from pop-ups to inline forms to engage your audience. You can have unlimited number of these across different pages to encourage people to join your list. But we also offer landing pages. So if you have trouble getting content on your website, if you don't have a website, which I can't imagine many of you don't, or if you don't want to share some content on your website, we have included landing page tools. So you can link to a page that Constant Contact hosts for you. It's as easy to use as any drag and drop editor you've ever used. Certainly it's very easy to use in Constant Contact. And you can build beautiful professional looking one-page website pages or one-page websites for no extra cost in Constant Contact. And you can use them in social media, in your email, a blog, anywhere you want. And speaking of social media, we have a social media management suite. So you can actually post to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn all from one spot and share your similar content from your email to social media or any content you want. And you can even monitor and react to replies on Facebook and Instagram directly through Constant Contact without having to go to several different apps. So to check out Constant Contact, if you're not already a customer, visit bit.ly/IBPA-CTCT. That's going to take you to the IBPA member benefit page about Constant Contact that Christopher spoke about earlier. So Christopher is going to come back on and we are going to take your questions.
All right. That was amazing. That was great information. I took notes. The IBPA Director of Marketing Communications, Adeline's on here as well. I'm sure she's taking a bunch of notes as well. Okay, so let's get to the questions. We have one from Janice. They ask, what do you recommend that we do with people who open or click our newsletters?
Can you read that one more time, Christopher?
Of course, no problem. They said, what do you recommend we do with people who open or click our newsletters?
That's a little vague question, and perhaps they can follow up with a little bit more information. But what you do with them, with opens, I don't suggest you do much because we've just learned how full of false positives, false negatives open rates are. You can take it all with a grain of salt with open rates. It could be somebody opening it, it might not be. Click-through though, click-through rates you definitely want to monitor. So high level, pay attention to your click-through rates, right? So after leaving this session, if you're not paying attention to your click-through rates, start paying attention to them. That's definitely what you want to be driving and increase behavior with, because it's ultimately telling you that the email was successful because open rates are so problematic. But you want to take it a step further, start paying attention to what they're clicking on. So depending on what tool you're using, I described earlier, Constant Contact gives you the ability to segment your list automatically based on click. But you definitely want to pay attention to what they're clicking on. For instance, if I send out an email and a majority of the people did not click on my primary call to action, I may reconsider how in future emails I provide that call to action, because every single time you're sending an email, I mean, the beautiful part about using a tool like Constant Contact is your audience is speaking to you. Through your reporting, you can listen to them. And one thing that too many marketers fail at is not paying attention to what people are saying via the click. So at the bare minimum, pay attention to that. You want to take it up a step though, start segmenting your list based on that behavior. Now, and I understand in your industry, there's probably some variances here because of who you're speaking to. But you may want to consider segmenting your list and sending similar content to based on what they clicked on, because it's more relevant. You're going to see future behavior.
Awesome. Okay, from Diana. We build our own lists, for example, foreign libraries, and not all the emails are good. Would Constant Contact stop my campaign if I got a certain number of bounces? They had this happen before where someone stopped them being able to use it.
All right. So one tricky thing about one-to-many presentations like this is that I would really need to look a little bit more into your data and the history. So I want to put that caveat in, because there's a lot of things that could occur to cause you from being stopped, or cause you being the reason you were stopped by whatever company you were using. So I'm gonna actually answer this in a couple of different levels, because it's actually a really important question. So, as I said at the top, Constant Contact has a sterling reputation. A reputation literally is everything, right? And I'm not saying that in a braggy way. Gmail, Hotmail, Outlook, all of these tools understand that when an email is sent through Constant Contact, we actually police spammers out, right? And believe me, spammers want to get in because we have outstanding delivery rates. And so we are very good at policing, keeping spammers and bad actors out. So one way we do that, and just to give you a little inside information on how everyone in our industry works, is there are known bad email addresses. Okay, we share blacklists, and these are typically either fake email addresses that, without going too technical on you, we and our peers put out in the universe, and when it gets dropped into a list, we know somebody's a bad actor because they shouldn't have access to this bad fake email address. Other things we do is just if we notice patterns with email addresses, okay, if we see enough of those uploaded to our tool, that's a big red flag. Like, whoa, okay, how do they have that many bad actor email addresses? And so we'll stop you and we'll say, hey, where'd you get this list? And we'll do a cleaning with you and explain to you, okay, these are known bad email addresses. And when I say bad, it's not like it's just bad in the sense that it had a typo, but that it's nefarious. So that's the first way we look at protecting you and all of our customers. The second part of that question is really list where you grew your list. And I'm not assuming that who was the person that asked the question, Christopher?
Diana.
Diana. I'm not suggesting you did this, Diana. Okay. But it's really important that if you grow a list, you're growing it organically. All right. And some people out there, and I doubt this is very common in your industry, will buy lists, right? You don't want to do that because with the idea of subscriber-based email marketing, permission-based email marketing, Constant Contact requires you, and this is true of our competitors, require you to have permission to email somebody, right? Now there's variances in permission, but how, if you bought a list, how does somebody actually know you? If you bought the list, they don't know you necessarily, and they don't want to hear from you because they never opted in. And so that's a big way to get red flagged is a bot list, because we also pay attention to that kind of behavior too. And another red flag that will occur when it comes to permission-based marketing is spammy behavior, okay, with lists. So what we'll see is a typical organization will upload their list, their biggest number, the very first time they sign up to a tool, which is not a big surprise. Then they'll incrementally add new contacts, right? But what a typical organization doesn't do is upload a big list when they first start, and then 2 weeks later upload another big list, and then 2 weeks later upload another big list. Where are you getting that many email addresses that quickly? And so that's also something that will set off a red flag. We'll hold your account in a lock status until you contact us. What we won't do is just arbitrarily kick you out, unless you're truly a horrible spammer, bad actor. But we will do is work with you on how you procure the email addresses. And this is all in efforts to protect our reputation, because our reputation is ultimately what we sell. And that's actually true of all of our competitors too.
Okay, so this is like a follow-up. Maria is asking, can you talk more about needing permission to send marketing emails?
Great question, Maria. So when it comes to permission, and I'm going to speak specifically in the US because there are variances in other parts of the world, but in the United States, permission is actually pretty broad. The definition of permission in the United States is that there's two kinds of permission you can have. Explicit permission is the gold standard, and that's generally people signing up to a list via a website, through a text to join feature that Constant Contact offers, through social media where you're soliciting for the email address. You're clearly soliciting for the email address to join a list. That's explicit permission. That's the gold standard. They know they're getting on a list, right? They're asking for your email. There's also implied permission. So implied permission is also legal in the United States, meaning that if they at some point contact you to do in a phone call to do some business or something, and you get their email address in the course of that conversation, or you trade business cards or something like that, even though it's not obvious that you're joining a list, by freely giving your contact information, that's implied permission, and that's legal in the United States. As I said, what's illegal is when you have neither of those. And the most common way that you would have neither of those is if you buy a list. Now, in other countries, there's a little bit more a little less leeway in the implied permission area. Generally, they need you to have explicit permission. Now, if you do operate either in another country, then you're probably familiar with these already. But if you do significant business in other countries, it behooves you to, especially in Canada and the UK, to learn specifically what you need to do to operate there. I'm sorry, Canada and Europe. I shouldn't have just said UK.
Mauricia is asking if Constant Contact integrates well with a Shopify website.
It does. So we have a Shopify integration where you can populate your email with just the push of a button titles that you're promoting on Shopify. So what it'll do is it'll bring in content, a little blurb. People can click on it and go directly to Shopify. Additionally, our Shopify integration will also bring in lists from Shopify, and you can actually do abandoned cart emails, segmentation, and things like that directly through the Shopify integration.
And another question, is the social marketing automation similar to services such as Later?
I'm not familiar with Later, but based on the title, most people bring up Hootsuite as the go-to. But I'll describe what it does, and then you can determine if it's similar to Later. So our social media tool, what you can do is create posts and tweets. You can post and tweet that to an unlimited number of social media accounts, again, for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And you can tie in the images from your Constant Contact image library or your own images, or we actually have an integration with Canva, so you can bring in images from Canva. And you can also create those posts and tweets with hyperlinks so that people go somewhere off of social media. What's probably similar Later is that you can schedule those. So you can either post those and tweet those out now, or you can schedule them up to a year in advance. So, and what's really nice about this is, unlike some other tools that do similar things, this is included with Constant Contact.
Okay, and someone's asking specifically about the IBPA member benefits. So some people are already Constant Contact members. So how do they integrate these discounts that they get through IBPA if they already have a membership? Is it only for new members? How does that work?
We can actually get them into that member discount. What I'd suggest is that they reach out to IBPA, and then Christopher, either you can go to me or whomever it's going to be. You can go to me or Jackie, who I talked to you earlier about, Christopher, and we can make sure we get them moved in under your membership benefit.
Okay, I just put my email in the chat, christopher@ibpa-online.org. So feel free to email me. Sandra, you're one of the people who asked that question. So just email me and we'll get in touch with the Constant Contact people. Okay, so another one is people that are just kind of starting out. So we have a lot of people that are indie publishers, and the question is, they only have maybe a book that comes out. This is probably more like author publisher, but some indie publishers that comes out only once every year, maybe 2 a year. So they're thinking they're not really going to be emailing people that often. So they're wondering, like, something like Constant Contact, like, because you all are like a subscription, right? So you pay like per month. So, or is it per email? How does that work? Because they're wondering, is it worth their money if they're not really sending that many emails out?
All right, so we are based on list size, and we actually base it on buckets of list size. So it's not like it's add a new contact, you pay more. It's in buckets, 0 to 500, 500 to 1500, et cetera, et cetera. And so as you grow, your price point goes up, but ideally you're growing, because why else would your list grow? So you're not paying per email, and you're not locked into any more than a month. So just short answer, yeah, it would be effective. But if I can give a little more complex answer, that may not be effective for you. So, one thing that Constant Contact prides ourselves in is transparency with our customers and beyond. And we have always led with training and education. So one of the biggest differentiators between our competitors and Constant Contact is literally the fact that I'm talking to you right now, and I'm going to talk to somebody else, another group, tomorrow and the next day. And I've been doing this for 11 years, and there's a whole team of us that do this. On top of that, we have US-based support to help you with anything beyond just technical questions like marketing questions. But I say that because I need to be transparent with you. I hate to say it, but I don't know that email marketing is going to be effective if you're going to be that staggered. If you're going to only email once a year for maybe a couple of weeks, you're going to be climbing a big hill, because, what's really tricky about email marketing and email marketing lists is it needs to have some regularity to be effective. You need to be on top of people's minds. And if we go back to when I talked about the subject lines and that familiar name in the inbox, if you're sending out once a year or even beyond that, your results probably not going to be that high, because effective marketing requires some standard of regularity. Now, in your industry, I respect that you may not have a title going out every year or so, but what you want to challenge yourself to do is, okay, what can I say the other 10 months, right? How can I keep people engaged the other 10 months? That may be challenging to come up with that amount of content, but you want to be at least giving them an email once a month just to stay top of mind, because when you do have something for them to pay attention to, when you do have a release, they may not be paying attention because they've tuned out or they've forgotten you. The other danger there is if you're sending that irregularly, you can definitely increase the number of people that are going to mark you as spam because they just don't recognize you. And before they even open the email, they're just going to mark it as spam. You really want to watch that kind of irregularity. If coming up with content, curating content is tricky on a monthly basis, you can prime the pump a little bit with social media. That might help you. But you really want to find a cadence, a regular cadence. Now, let me actually share the best practices because I just gave everybody kind of an out. I'm speaking specifically to that person. Like, challenge yourself to do once a month. The best practice is actually send twice a month, at least. And in your industry, I wouldn't go any shorter intervals than that, but that's the best way to keep the pump primed, to keep top of mind. Now, I understand and respect curating that much content. If you don't have regular releases and other things to talk about, can be a challenge. But that's where I would lean on your peers and your association. Sharing industry knowledge, sharing articles about your authors. You might have more content available than you think you do to engage a subscriber. But that engagement, when you want them to pay attention, unless you have titles coming out constantly, having an irregular cadence could hurt you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great information. I actually had a question about that, so I will cross that off myself. Okay, someone's asking if Constant Contact automatically adds Captcha.
Captcha, I'm assuming that's what they're asking.
Yeah.
No. So you're talking about when they subscribe? No.
And that's more for really the website, right?
Yeah. That's what threw me off a little bit. No, we don't have a Captcha feature on our subscription tools.
Yeah. Okay. So the only other question that I had, that's the other questions people have asked, was I think sometimes people worry about being too salesy. And obviously, as indie publishers, the big thing is selling books. So I don't know if you have any recommendations in terms of these, newsletters that go out, but at the end of the day, you want to sell books, but should you be blatant about it, or should you be, like a little more like, hey, I have all this information. Oh, by the way, I also have this book. Buy that. What do you say to that?
Sure, that's not an uncommon question, though I may rely on you a little bit, Christopher, for industry insight. So, you're not uncommon in asking that question. I don't want to appear salesy. Well, first of all, anybody that doesn't feel comfortable selling isn't going to sell very much. And I mean, I hate to be so blunt, but if you shriek away so much from promoting an offer, a product, a fee, something, then you're probably not going to sell much. But that doesn't mean bombard them with spammy, buy now, buy now. I'm not trying to suggest that. What you want to do is balance things out. So generally, a good balance. Now, this is a challenge because it revolves around content curation. 80% useful educational content and 20% promotional is generally a good mix, because what you're doing is you're giving people useful information, but you're highlighting that book, that title, whatever it is you're trying to promote. And the benefit there is you're engaging your contacts long term. You're providing useful, educational, insightful content. If they're able to take action right now, that promotional content is going to help them take action right now. But if it's going to take them a little while to make a determination to support that book, you're planting the seed. It may not be the first email that convinces them to do it, but it may be the third. And I just want to define again, like, I'm not talking about, and I almost abhor that word salesy. I'm not talking about be salesy, bombarding people with salesy messages, but it doesn't hurt to promote. And, if you're trying to promote the book, that's promotion is sales. That's what you're doing. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, if you wrote a great book or you're an indie publisher and you're publishing a great book, they want to hear about it. So don't be afraid to let them know it exists. Yeah, so Matthew, this has been excellent information. I'm going to stop the record, but don't worry, I'm not going to immediately just disappear. But I just can't tell you how much IBPA appreciates Constant Contact for providing this as an opportunity for members, because email marketing is so incredibly important. And I mean, you prove that with this webinar, but also just having access to something like this is really important. So we appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And we're glad to support IBPA and all of you and want to see you be successful. And certainly those of you that are Constant Contact customers, pay attention to the marketing we send you because we aren't necessarily selling you things. We're just offering free education. So make sure you watch that. And those of you that aren't Constant Contact customers, we sure hope to see you become one soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.